Okay, how's that? Thanks, Jim. So exciting to be here and be speaking this year. So first of all, just thank you guys for coming. Thank you for your love of and interest in the oceans. What I'm speaking about today, hold on, I can't see because the microphone is sort of in the way. What I'm speaking about today is a little bit of a departure from, I think, what you're expecting. I'll go into a little bit of the plastics and their story, but I want to talk about alternatives. I want to look forward. Right now, plastics are everywhere. Whatever store you're in, whatever classroom you're in, we can all look around us and see plenty of them. Not only are we purchasing them at the store, but they're packaged in plastic. So our plastic items come in plastic, and then we pay for them usually with plastic. We take them home in a plastic bag, and to top it all off, they give us a BPA receipt. So receipts laden in BPA that we get to touch and feel and then wear our plastic. It's kind of difficult to escape at this point. And sometimes when I'm in the store and I pick up an item and I can feel by its weight that it's actually glass or ceramic, I'm surprised, and delightfully so. Sometimes I feel like plastic has become so ingrained in our lives and in our culture that it's hard to escape. Let's see here. And if there's any doubt that we live in a world full of plastic, I've collected a few images that speak to the point. Over 80% of the trash in the ocean is plastic, coming from land-based sources. I'm talking about things like straws, plastic bottles, caps, cups, mostly single-use disposable plastics. And it's not just in the ocean. This is a camel in the middle of the desert in the UAE. So plastic is everywhere. And the other funny thing about plastic pollution is that it's not really just about the environment. It's a huge waste management issue. Number one, plastic doesn't really leave us. It may break down, what we call decompose, into smaller and smaller pieces, but it never goes away. That chemical footprint is with us forever. On average, less than 7% of the world's plastic usage, is recycled. So what are we doing with the rest? We know about the gyres. Here's some plastic on a beach. That was Hawaii. This is the Caribbean. This river in Manila breaks my heart. It's one of my favorite and least favorite at the same time plastic pollution images. We see plastic here, and we see it on our beaches, our roadsides, and on our ditches, but what about the plastic we're not seeing? Once plastic is in the water, it begins to break down into these smaller pieces, and along the way, it releases its chemicals into the surrounding ocean water. Then the small bits of plastic are picked up by sea and wildlife because it's mistaken as food. That wildlife is then eaten by a predator, and the toxic concentration continues all the way up the food chain until it winds up on our dinner plates. And that's why plastic pollution is a public health issue. It's linked with things like cancer, obesity, diabetes, autism, reproductive health issues, immune suppression, cardiovascular disease, and this list goes on and on and on. One of the most, I think, horrifying studies was done by Environmental Working Group a few years back, where they studied newborn umbilical cord blood in US newborn babies. And they found that babies were being born with, on average, 300 toxins in their bloodstreams. And then last is this picture here of an albatross, a baby albatross that was born on Midway Atoll, an island that's so remote in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, far from any human contact, but somehow the mom albatross birds are able to find these little bits of plastic, and they lovingly feed them to their babies until their little tummies are so full that they can't ingest any more food or water, so they starve on a belly full of plastic. Lastly, the reason that plastic pollution isn't just about the environment is because it's a growing epidemic with absolutely no end in sight. The plastic and chemical industries have no end-of-life plan for the products they're producing. And you can see on this graph here that in 1960, shortly after our love affair with plastic began, the average American was consuming 30 pounds of plastic per year, whereas now we're consuming about 300 pounds of plastic per year. Now let's take a look at two of the biggest offenders: plastic bags and plastic water bottles. What you see here are the numbers in billions of our consumption. The blue column is the US and the red column is the world. I've added in the oil barrels that represent the amount of oil it takes to produce this much plastic. If you add the total world consumption of plastic bags and plastic water bottles at 140 million barrels, that's enough to fuel over 3.6 million cars. And we're using this for single-use disposable plastics. We use it once and we toss it. So in the last 10 years alone, as a society, having trouble with the mic, we've used more plastic than in all the past several decades combined. And that is just growing. If we stay on trend, by 2050, our number for annual plastic consumption will be at 2 trillion pounds per year. So imagine the number of oil barrels it'll take to fulfill that production. But not only is the plastic pollution problem not just about the environment, it's really not even about the plastic. The environmental justice movement, as we know it, began in the 1960s with people like Cesar Chavez, who was protecting the rights of migrant California farm workers, including their right to protection from pesticide chemicals and toxic pesticides. In 1962, a woman by the name of Rachel Carson published a book called Silent Spring. Silent Spring has been widely credited as the launching of the modern environmental movement. In the 60s, we also saw civil rights action, Clean Water Act passage, the DDT lawsuits, and the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency. And my point here is this: we clearly understand the problem, and we've acted on it. But we haven't acted on it in a mass market fashion. Whether we're talking about drilling, fracking, or plastic pollution, it's all the same. We're asking people to change what they're doing. When we talk about goals, such as these reductions, we're asking for behavior change. And the behavior we've largely focused on changing is our own. Corporations love this because they can use the personal responsibility battle cry. They would not be selling plastics or producing plastics if we would just stop buying plastics. But they've made it so hard. First of all, it's hard to find your product and not in any other alternative than plastic. And secondly, they've made it so inexpensive. We're basically trapped in a vicious cycle of supply and demand. And as our cycle has gone awry, neither of us are willing to budge. In studies recently conducted at the University of Utah's Eccles School of Business, researchers found that just the mere exposure to the concept of money, things like photographs of currency or reading money-related words, produced unethical behavior. And these studies are backed up by findings at UC Berkeley, where they found that money made people less human, less compassionate, less ethical, more self-interested, more selfish, and more insular. What they're telling us is that a rich person is much more likely to care about anyone but themselves. And these are the people that run our corporations, right? Boardrooms around the world are run by the rich. And we're being told they want to get richer. Global wealth distribution, the way it stands right now, no one but a rich person has a chance. So if we want to make a long-lasting, considerable impact, we need to start by focusing on where the money is and focusing on an alternative that can still make people money without calling into question their ethics too far. The way the plastics industry and empire was built was predicated on profit margin and the protection of profits at any cost. But something just happened last week. Walmart announced groundbreaking news: policies that could actually result in the eventual discontinuation of chemicals in their store aisles. And although their motivation may be profit-driven, I can't speak to that. I really don't care. I just want it to happen. They can make as much money as they want selling me healthy, sustainable products. And I believe, really, in the long run, corporate motivation is always going to be profit. We can talk about the triple bottom line and the 3 Ps, people, profit, planet. But at the end of the day, a corporate entity is founded upon its investors and its stakeholders. And a profit is never going to come behind a social mission. That doesn't mean that there aren't amazing companies with social missions out there doing incredible work. But that work is not going to be done at the price of profit. Profit being the biggest motivator for corporations, what's the biggest motivator for consumers? A recent Ipsos poll found that 59% of consumers are unwilling to pay a premium for eco-friendly products, and 51% just want to find the product that best fits their needs. Still, 57% of consumers are going to care about the environmental impact of their product and their purchase. And 40% say they'd absolutely buy green if they could find it and if it were equally priced. In 2011, SC Johnson did a study, and they found that environmental knowledge has increased, and questions and confusion over whether or not a certain product is good or bad for the environment has decreased. So that sounds great, right? More knowledge, less confusion. But here's the problem. The knowledge is so vast and the problem is so huge that people no longer feel that they can impact the environment on their own. Their purchases really don't count. Therefore, with economic stability always being the number one factor, product purchases are going to be made based on a financial incentive, either price, coupon, etc. Now, in order to create change, we're going to have to break this vicious cycle of supply and demand. One side's going to have to give. And it can be you or me. You know, we take home a product and it impacts our immediate family and our friends, possibly. Or it can be the corporations, where their impact is global. A corporation like Walmart making a game-changing decision the way they did last week is not only a global scale decision, but they're being watched by every other large corporation in the world. If they succeed, the floodgates will open for the environmentally friendly marketplace. And basically, they only have to adapt 2 things to make this happen. Number 1, what they're selling, and number 2, how much they're selling it for. The idea of what Walmart's doing is particularly exciting for me because when I launched my own nonprofit a few years ago, it was based on the idea of compassionate capitalism, where we put aside profit margin for just a minute, put passion over profit. Not forever, not long term, just long enough to reset the cycle of supply and demand. Let's go through a simplified, super simplified example of what I'm talking about. With Walmart's new policy, let's say that they have to, this was supposed to come up separately, so I apologize. Let's say that we start with 2 bottles of shampoo, one that right now in an eco-friendly world where it costs more to avoid toxic chemicals than it does to just purchase them, Walmart buys the bottle of shampoo for $1.50, but they can buy the normal, traditional, chemical-laden shampoo for $1. Traditional retail margins are 100%, meaning that an individual wanting to buy the green shampoo would buy it for $3, whereas the typical traditional shampoo is $2. We know that consumers do not want to pay a premium for green. I realize I'm speaking to the choir here in Boulder, but most consumers globally do not. So what I ask is this: let Walmart choose a compassionate margin, one that still allows profitability, but also allows competition. Now, what that margin is going to vary so widely, depending on customer demographics, location, et cetera. But there's a number, a tipping point for every product where the sales price, although not equal, is perceived by the consumer as equal. For a minute, let's say that tipping point is around the 50-cent mark at Walmart. By employing a 70% margin, Walmart can cut the cost of that shampoo to within 55 cents of the typical shampoo and make it competitive in the shopping aisles. But that's not even the fun part yet. Oh, here's the fun part. When a company as large as Walmart creates a purchase order, it immediately affects global economies of scale for the ingredients that go into that shampoo. Before Walmart even finishes and completes their first transaction, their opening purchase order will affect global commodities in such a way that that shampoo that was $2 or $1.50, sorry, is now $1. And please just focus on the green side first. So now Walmart has a great opportunity. They invested their 30% of profit margin early on to create a $2.55 bottle of shampoo that now costs them $1, giving them 155% profit margin. So their short-term investment in that 30% profit reduction is now being repaid at 155%. Of course, they could choose to go back down to the 100% model and sell it for $2, but either way, already shampoos are less money. Now, look at the black side of the screen. When Walmart has to make a decision of what their aisle space is going to contain, and they choose eco-friendly products, that means less room for traditional shampoos. So the cost of buying that traditional shampoo just went up. So now you're faced with the proposition of traditional shampoo costing more than eco-friendly shampoos. I'm going to leave you with this. I know that's a very simplified version, but even when you add in the more complex economic factors and the immediate and frantic pushback that you're going to feel from the chemical industry, I guarantee you this works. And this quote from the Dalai Lama kind of sums up my mission and my outlook for the future of what Walmart's doing and what we all can do as small business owners. Compassion is not religious business. It's human business. It is not luxury. It is essential for our own peace and mental stability. It's essential for human survival. Thank you.